He became very anxious and took good care of his wife. One day, a son is born to them. The merchant is overjoyed at the birth of his son. He distributed sweets throughout the city and spared a lot in raising his child. As the son grew, the merchant decided to send him to a gurukul so that he could become an educated scholar. Although the son was still young, the merchant sent him to gurukul to receive an education. The boy excelled in his studies at the gurukul, diligently following all the instructions of his teacher. Gradually, he became the most accomplished student there. In the gurukul, the boy studies all the Vedas, Puranas, and scriptures, ultimately becoming a great scholar. The teacher was also very pleased with the boy because he had acquired all the knowledge at a young age. But as it is said that one never knows when time might change. One day, due to a natural disaster, his parents died, and until then, the boy's education was incomplete. When the boy heard the news that his parents were no longer in this world and everything had been destroyed, he was detached from worldly illusions. After that, the boy decided that after completing his education at the Gurukul, he would spend his entire life for the well-being of others. Once the boy's education was complete, he became a monk. He left worldly possessions and went into the jungles of the Himalayas. There he practiced meditation for a long time. After completing his meditation, the monk began to impart knowledge to people. With time, discussions about the ascetics spread far and wide, and people from distant places started coming to him for education. Many also came seeking solutions to their problems. The monk effortlessly resolved the problems of all people, which made him famous throughout the entire state. However, the city where he lived had a king known for his cruel nature. When the king learned about the monk, he decided to meet him. The next morning, the king left his palace to meet the monk and arrived at the hermitage. Upon reaching there and seeing the monk, the king was mesmerized. There was a unique radiance on the monk's face. When he approached the monk, he experienced profound peace. The king paid his respects to the monk, sat beside him, and began to converse. The king was so impressed with the monk's personality in their first meeting that he decided then and there to tread the path of goodness. He thought to himself that if the monk could change him so much in such a short meeting, then if he stayed with him permanently, his life would completely transform. With this thought, the king began urging the monk to come to his palace. Unable to refuse the king's request, the monk agreed, and they set off for the royal palace. Upon reaching the palace, the king showed great respect to the monk. Subsequently, the king arranged for a royal feast for the monk in a splendid chamber. After the meal, the monk thanked the king and sought permission to leave. Upon hearing this, the king said that he could stay in the royal gardens as long as he wished. There would be no inconvenience, and both the people and the king would be pleased if he stayed. Upon hearing this, the monk accepted the king's proposal. After that, the king instructed his servants to arrange for the monk's stay, food, and clothing in the gardens. Following the king's orders, the servants constructed a beautiful cottage. The monk started residing in that cottage. Many years passed while the monk lived in that cottage, and during this time, the king served him well. However, after several years, one day, the king and queen had to go to another state for essential duties. Yet, they appointed a servant to take care of the monk's needs. Unfortunately, after the king's departure, the servant fell ill, went back home, and never returned. In anger, the monk scolded the king and said, "O king, if you cannot fulfill your responsibilities, why do you take them up?" Then, seeking forgiveness, the king said to the monk, "O Lord, if I have made any mistake, I apologize for it. Forgive me, calm your anger, and tell me what has happened." Hearing this, the monk explained, "After you left, no one provided me with food here, and I remained hungry for many days. No one bothered to ask me about my well-being when I arrived here." Upon hearing this, the king apologized to the monk and said, "O Lord, there will be no such mistake after today." Then the matter settled down after a while. When the conversation was taking place between the king and the monk, the queen was quietly listening to all the conversation and observing everything. After that, the king did not give the monk any chance to complain and served him well. However, a few days later, the king had to go out of his kingdom for some urgent work. But this time, before leaving the kingdom, the king told his queen, "Until I return, you will take care of the monk yourself." Upon hearing this, the queen said, "Yes, your majesty, you can leave without worry. I will take good care of the monk." After that, every day the queen used to prepare food and give it to the monk. But one day, the queen went to take a bath and forgot to give food to the monk. The monk waited for food for quite some time, but when the food did not come, the monk started wondering why there was no food today. After that, the monk thought he would go to the palace himself and see why the food had not arrived yet, and then he reached the palace. When he reached inside the palace, his eyes fell on the queen. The queen's long, thick black hair, which was waving on her waist, her coal-lined eyes, which were mesmerizing just to look at, left him spellbound. His deer-like gait left the ascetic amazed when he saw the queen's exquisite beauty. The beauty of the queen captivated the monk's mind. Without saying anything, he returned to his hut. The ascetic could not forget the beauty of the queen's form, and he remained in his hut, abandoning food and drink for days. As a result, he became very weak. After some time, the king returned, and when he learned of the monk's condition, he went straight to the monk and said, "Oh God, what happened to you? How did you become so weak? What is bothering you, and why are you lost in deep thoughts? Have I done something wrong?" The monk then replied, "No, O king, you have committed no mistake. There is no fault on your part." Hearing this, the king said, "Then please tell me what is the matter. I will surely alleviate your distress. What concerns you, and why are you so deeply absorbed in thought?" The monk then said, "O king, I have not forgotten anything about you. But upon seeing the beauty of your queen, I have become entrapped in the allure of her beauty. Now, I cannot live without the queen." Hearing this, the king was astonished. After thinking for a while, the king said to the ascetic, "I will give you my queen." Hearing this, the monk was very pleased. The king then took the monk to the palace. When the king and the monk arrived at the palace, the queen was adorned in her most beautiful attire and jewelry that day. In the morning, the king approached the queen and said, "You should assist the ascetic. These have become very weak, and I do not want the sin of the murder of a knowledgeable person to fall on my head." After hearing this, the king asked the queen if she wanted to bear this sin on her head. Upon hearing the king's words, the queen asked the king about the reason for the sorrow of the monk. So, the king told the queen that the monk had become captivated by your extraordinary beauty. Upon hearing the king's words, the queen said, "Don't worry, your majesty. Now, leave everything to me. I know what to do now. After that, neither the sin of murdering the monk will be on you, nor will it lead to the destruction of my sacred duty." Hearing this from the queen, the king handed the queen over to the monk. Afterwards, the monk, accompanied by the queen, reached the palace. When the queen arrived at the monk's hut, she said to him, "We need a house to stay. We cannot live in this shack." Hearing this, the monk went to the king and told him, "O king, we need a house to stay." Upon hearing the monk's words, the king arranged for a house for them. Then, the monk, with the queen, reached the house. When the queen arrived with the monk at that house, she said to him, "This house is very dirty, and its condition is very poor. I cannot stay in this house." Upon hearing this, the monk again went to the king and said to him, "O king, the house you have given us is in very bad condition." Upon hearing the words of the monk, the king improved the condition of the house. After that, the queen went inside the house, bathed, and returned to the bed. Then the monk also came to the bed. After that, the queen said to the monk, "Do you know who you are and what you have become now? You were a great monk for whom the king himself provided all the necessary things. People from far and wide came to receive knowledge from you. You showed the path of truth, solved people's problems, and everyone considered you a guru. They worshipped you as the embodiment of God. And today, due to desire, you have become my slave. Upon hearing the queen's words, the ascetic was shocked, realizing that he was a renunciant and wondering what he was doing. He had left all these comforts in search of peace in the jungles. When the monk regained his senses, he started crying out loud and screaming. He said to the queen, "Forgive me, your highness. What was I about to do? I will go to the king and submit myself." Hearing this from the ascetic, the queen asked him, "Maharaj, I have a question in my mind. Please answer my question." Upon hearing the queen's words, the monk said, "Ask, what is your question?" Then the queen said, "When you did not get food that day, you became very angry. That's when I saw this side of you for the first time, and since then, I have been noticing a change in your behavior. Why did this happen, Maharaj? Why did you become so angry?" After hearing the queen's words, the monk explained to the queen that when he was in the jungle, he didn't even get food on time. But when he came to the palace, after coming to the palace, he received all the comforts. And then he got entangled in the allure of all these comforts. Greed arose in me, and then I developed a craving for it. When I didn't get it, anger arose within me. Then the queen said, "Maharaj, it is true that if desires are not fulfilled, anger arises, and if desires are fulfilled, greed arises." Then the monk said to the queen, "The fulfillment of desire has led me to the gateway of temptation, and I have become attracted to you." After that, the monk, taking the queen, went to the king and said, "O king, forgive me. I have realized my mistake. Here, your queen and all these things are not what I desire. I was about to commit this wrong act under the influence of my desires and ruin my life, but now I understand everything." After that, the monk said, "O king, the cause of a person's ruin is the formation of 4 habits. Every person in the world has these 4 shortcomings, but the one who controls them escapes from sorrows and troubles, while the one who cannot control these 4 faults reaches the brink of destruction." Hearing this, the king said, "Maharaj, tell me those 4 habits that lead to the destruction of a person." Then the ascetic told the king about the habits that lead to the destruction of people. He said, "O king, the first habit that destroys people is desire, because desire is the first flaw within every person, and the person who cannot control his desires cannot be successful in any area of life, because as soon as one of his desires is fulfilled, another arises, and when the second desire is fulfilled, a third desire awakens in his mind. And thus, by pursuing desires without control, he gets entangled in this web and remains unhappy. Therefore, when one gains control over his desires, he gains control over our minds as well. And when our mind is under our control, we attain true happiness. Then, whatever we wish for happens with us." Then the monk said, "O king, another habit that ruins humans is lust. Lust is born from the desires that arise in our minds. Just as desire knows no end, and humans keep getting trapped in the web of lust. Enslaved by lust, humans see nothing else. All the fights that have taken place so far have had the biggest cause as the desire to obtain this woman. Enslaved by the love of this woman, kings and emperors have fought many battles before today. Many kings and emperors lost because they remained engrossed in making love to these women. God created women to increase this world, but nowadays people have made it a prey to their lust. They have started considering it as a means of entertainment. And when they don't get this entertainment, they go mad and sit doing all sorts of things. Therefore, hey king, one should stay away from lust as much as possible." Then the monk said, "O king, the third habit that ruins humans is anger, because when a person's desire is not fulfilled, anger arises within him. And when a person is angry, he cannot control himself, and then he makes wrong decisions in anger. He speaks ill of others, utters curses, and when his anger subsides, he realizes his mistake. But by then, everything had already been ruined. Due to anger, many well-executed tasks of a person get spoiled. When anger arises within a person, he becomes internally weak, and a weak person cannot accomplish anything. Success is never possible for him. Anger generates stress within us, and once we succumb to stress, our entire life is ruined. Then the monk said, "Hey king, the fourth habit that ruins a person is greed. Hey king, the result of greed is always negative. In the grip of greed, we harm many people. In every person's life, such opportunities come at some point or another. When a person sits in the lap of greed and in the desire for more, does something that not only loses what he had, but also causes harm to him, because as soon as one desire of a person is fulfilled, his greed increases and more aspirations start to arise in his mind. A person who is greedy stays far away from success, because the negative consequences of greed inevitably come to light. If we timely abandon greed and do not fall into its trap, then we can surely become successful individuals." Finally, the monk tells the king that if a person abandons 4 habits, no one can stop him from being successful in life, and those who do not give up these habits can be stopped from success in life. I got caught up in its cycle while being a monk, so an ordinary person can't avoid it. That's why, O king, people should always avoid these habits. Unknowingly, we make mistakes that we later regret, and when we realize that mistake, it's often too late. By then, we have already suffered the consequences and are left wondering about the mistakes that led to our downfall. If we can identify the reasons for our failures, we can turn our lives into ones filled with happiness. If you found this helpful, please give us a thumbs up to help us reach more people seeking ancient wisdom. If you're new here, subscribe and click the notification bell for more lessons on ancient wisdom. Thank you for watching, and see you in our next video. To watch more videos, choose one of the videos that will appear on your screen now.